progress is coming faster. First we had 500,000 years with only the hand axe. Now we've got the bow, the sickle, arrows. Things are starting to happen. Now, one strange thing happens with the sickle, and this is an archaeological puzzle which is not fully settled yet. The sickle disappears for a couple of thousand years. The sickle appears, they seem to be harvesting crops, and then it disappears for a few thousand years. What happened? Well, the dominant theory is crop failure. That for some reason, the crops failed, and they're no longer harvesting. So you don't need the sickle. It'll be introduced again, but later. Tell you another theory, just a possibility. It's a long shot, I'd say, but it's a possibility. With the bow and arrow, hunting becomes a lot easier. You can be removed from the animal at a safe distance and shoot your arrow. And it may mean that protein gathering through hunting becomes a more important source of food than even the gathering of the crops. It could be. So perhaps the bow being introduced, perhaps it's crop failure, but things are starting to happen. Now, we're entering into the Mesolithic period. This is around 10,000 BC. This is going to be the transition from hunter-gatherers into domestication of animals, raising of crops. This is the period, the Mesolithic, when people start to settle. They have grindstones on which they can grind whatever grain they get, but they also grind cosmetics, eye makeup. This is an important part of the culture. It's probably both religious, ritual, and maybe also just pure decorative. So they take green, which is malachite, right, and put it on their eyes. Mixed with a little bit of fat, it binds it, and you start to get cosmetics. And then we start to get real civilization as we know it. We're going to enter into the Neolithic period, the New Stone Age. This is when we get pottery. Now, something about pottery that's surprising. Pottery is not as easy to develop as you may think. We take it for granted. But think of what it involves. Finding the right clay, and you have to build a kiln to fire it. You have to fire it some way. And that's not such an easy thing to do. It's a big step. But pottery does wonderful things for you. You can now cook the grains that you've harvested. You can make
I don't have a problem with learning about pottery.
You can also make
but
beer, which makes life better.
I don't know. I don't know how many of you are into pottery. I don't think you care too much about the pottery part.
Little arrowheads. You need skilled labor. So now we get division of labor. We get the tool maker, we get a baker, we get a brewer, we get the pot maker. We're starting to get organized society up and down the Nile. This is the Neolithic period.
Job descriptions. That's what they're talking about now. Job descriptions. Each person is doing something
We
different.
start to get politics. In this early period, at the end of prehistory, but before writing, before 3200 BC, we start to get all these villages up and down the Nile. And by the way, the population of Egypt, I think, will surprise you at this period. It's about 2,000. That's
What?
the entire population of Egypt, these isolated villages. But towards the end of this period, they seem to have kings. Upper and Lower Egypt, two divisions of Egypt. Each one seems to be ruled by a single ruler. So we're getting a kind of low-level unification, a social strata, a political strata. Each is ruled by a king. Now, one of the things you have to remember about Egypt is Upper Egypt is on the bottom. And Lower Egypt is on the top, because the Nile flows from the south to the north. So we refer to up the Nile is going south.
You made an interesting point. Before I started listening to this series, I was always confused about how they would describe north and south. Like, it made no sense. They talk about something, a town being in the north, but if you look at the map, it's clearly towards the south. Like, what are they saying? This is confusing. So this guy clarifies a lot of things. The Nile River runs upward to the north. So, their understanding of direction was that everything starts up and comes down. So if the river is flowing towards a direction, that's the south. Even though, according to the earth, that's the north. But that doesn't matter. A good example, I would say, would probably be downtown. A lot of people say, yeah, man, I'm going downtown. Well, as you go further downtown, you're actually going further north. If you go uptown, you're going south. So only when you look at it that way can you understand where they were coming from, how they were trying to express north and south and the kingships that developed in those lands. It's crazy, but at the same time, put yourself in their position. Try to relate things that little odd things we do now, they did back then. We weren't the first people to do it. We just reintroduced it. Like I said, most people, when they go downtown district, they're actually going further north. The Nile River went north. If you go to the north of the river, you're going south in a southern direction. You're going down. But if you go up the river, it's in the opposite direction. It's kind of confusing, but then it's not. So just look for little clues and it'll help you along.
And down the Nile is going north. That's why Upper Egypt is below Lower Egypt. So remember that. But we're starting to get civilization.
Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt.
Now these people, these Neolithic people, New Stone Age people, they have all kinds of things.
See, he just said it again. Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. So what we would consider Upper Egypt, in the north, no, that's not Upper Egypt. Upper Egypt is in the south. Just like I was just saying, when you go downtown, you're not going in a southern direction, you're going in a northern direction. But once you start gathering the information and seeing the parallels between then and now, a lot of stuff starts to become clear. Like, oh, so that's where that came from. You'd be surprised.
Start burying their dead in sandpit burials. And these sandpit burials are perhaps the origin of mummification. If you bury a body in the sand, it dehydrates naturally. It's a natural mummy that we get when we find these early burials. But more important about these burials is the people are buried with possessions. They're not just chucked in a pit to get rid of them. When you bury someone with pots, with jewelry, the suggestion is a belief in life after death. So even before writing, we can try to make some inferences about what these people thought. And burials is just one aspect. They also carved their slate palettes. Now, a palette is a flat surface for grinding the cosmetics I was talking about, but they carved them in the shapes of animals. Sometimes whimsical animals, a hippopotamus, a turtle. And they would grind their cosmetics. This is a sign that life is perhaps getting a little easier. You can kind of lay back and do a little bit of art. These are people who care about the finer things in life. They also had little statues, little figurines made out of clay, of women, often these wide-hipped women. Very often it's suggested that these figurines are fertility symbols. They could well be, but we have to be careful. We don't know for sure. They could just be figurines. Right? They also have decorated pots, and that's going to be important. They have blacktop pots. Now, with blacktop, it's a red Nile clay pot, but it has a very nice black rim. And the way they did that was you take your pot and you invert it in a fire, and it carbonizes the rim. So they have decorations. They have incisions on the pots, maybe little wavy lines. Indestructible. Granted, pots break. There were no Egyptologists in the 19th century when Petrie started. He was a surveyor. Went out to survey the Great Pyramids, fell in love with Egypt, and he's an Egyptologist. There were no Egyptologists in the 19th century when Petrie... Wild man. Flinders Petrie. Now, Sir Flinders Petrie. Sir Flinders Petrie. He was a great guy, really wild man. He used to walk 20 miles a day, right? He would walk, and on Fridays he would walk 20 miles one way, get the payment for his men, come back and pay them. Remarkable man. He wasn't trained as an Egyptologist. There were no Egyptologists in the 19th century when Petrie started. He was a surveyor. Went out to survey the Great Pyramids, fell in love with Egypt, and excavated for the next 70 years. And Petrie made the interesting observation. He said, you can tell which site is earlier than another by the pottery. Now, in his day, everybody was looking for treasure. They were looking for gold. They were looking for statues. Petrie was looking for knowledge.
So, he keeps going back to the pottery thing. A lot of people might find that boring. But, at the same time, what he's saying is that some people can tell you how old a thing is by the pottery. The way the pottery was made, the material that they used. Some generations use materials. It's like bell bottoms and butterfly collars. So you go to a museum in 2025, a clothes museum, let's say, and you see bell bottoms and a butterfly collar on a mannequin. Well, unless that's the current style, anybody that's of a certain age will be able to tell you, I remember those. That's back when my grandmother was a kid. That's had to be during the 70s, during the 60s and 70s. Same thing with music. Certain music you can listen to and you're like, man, that's old. That was when my great grandmother was around. That's when my grandfather was around. So what they're doing is they're using the pottery to date time periods in civilization. Excuse me. So that's what I'm gathering from it. But we'll let him talk and he can tell you.
And he excavated at places that nobody else wanted to excavate. He would look at places that weren't promising, but they had pottery. And he would go there and he'd say, think of it this way. Let's say you find one site with a pot, typical water pot, that's undecorated. Good. Now another village has pots perhaps or another site has pots with wavy lines inside. Same kind of pot, same shape, but wavy lines. Maybe indicating it's water. Great. Now, you find another site that has the same kind of pot, wavy lines, and handles. This is fancier. This is the late model. And what Petrie realized was things go from the simple to the complex. So we can use pottery to date a site by whether it's complex, whether it's simple, and this was all due to Sir Flinders Petrie. So pottery is crucial to prehistorians.
Okay, so pretty much what I said. They're using certain techniques, such as the one that this Petrie gentleman uses. He's gathering information on the culture, the time period, rather. He's gathering information on the time period based on the pottery. You know, does it have handles? Does it not have handles? Is it decorated? Is it not decorated? Makes sense. It's like a history detective of sorts. But oh man, my sinuses are starting to kick in, y'all, and I don't want to be sneezing through the whole video. So on that note, we'll end this, but we'll be back to talk again.